VikesNow, Dustin Baker. We are done with the preseason, so we're going to break down this final preseason contest and the implication they have going forward, especially on the 53-man roster. Just the takeaways of the 23-13 loss in Denver. Before we get into the details, I just want to say, hopefully you agree with me, this preseason sucked. It was not really fun. It was by design not to be fun, but somebody emailed me for the mailbag thing at Vikings territory and asked me what would I give for a grade, and I was like, a D plus, or a C minus, because, based on the way O'Connell wanted to do this with no premier starters, it was destined to be shitty. And every time I sat down to watch the game, at least entertainment value, of course they're scouting the players that will make the roster bubble or whatever, but it was just a underwhelming blah preseason, and I'm glad it's over because I want to see the real shit in 13 days. And then it set up this grand-ass mystery about how the Vikings will perform. Maybe I'll do a show on that topic, about the first-year head coach against the primary foe in your building, trying to unlock the quarterback, the eternal quest to make him Staffordish. And it's all coming down to, well, what are we going to get week one? Because this preseason showed you absolutely zilch about their potential or their capabilities. I didn't expect to make that little speech, but it just came out, so bear with me. Let's get back to the topic at hand, which is the Broncos taking it to the Vikings 23-13, 0-3, winless preseason. There's all kinds of bad omen stats about teams that lose all the preseason games. But the convenient one to always counter is that those winless Lions from 2008 went 4-0 in the preseason. So I guess the logic nullifies there. Alrighty, Broncos, Vikings. The first one I want to point out is that Luigi Villain may not make the 53-man roster. Hopefully he'll get on the practice squad, but this son of a gun is opportunistic. Against the 49ers, I believe he had a fumble recovery, and then against the Broncos, the ball got tipped up in the air, and bada bing, he came down with it. Now there's some luck there, but at kind of the proverbial end of the day, that shit matters. He's the guy that's coming up with the big plays, the turnovers. And there was a lot of smoke about him coming from Michigan and Wake Forest because he has that irresistible name that, this guy is going to be a premier pass rusher at some point, and I can't believe he didn't get drafted. Well, hopefully he sticks with the Vikings because he does show very small flares of promise. And I'm not sure if he'll clear waivers. I don't expect him to make the roster. I don't think anybody really does. But he lived up to his cool name a couple times this preseason, and good for him. So we'll see if he latches onto the practice squad, and maybe we'll see him down the road. But I wanted to call him out because it ain't nothing that he came up with 2 turnovers in the last 2 games. Credit to Luigi Villain. My son was watching the game with me, and this is the first time he heard that name. And he was like, Luigi? Really? And I was like, well, yeah, no, not that one, but pretty damn close. All right, that's number one. Not in any order of importance, because that one would probably be at the bottom. The next is injuries. The bug buzzed, especially in the first quarter for the Vikings on the injuries. And I think notably Brian Asamoah came out and then came right back in, but he was having a pretty flashy preseason. Didn't have a very good outing against the Broncos. Nobody cares. He showed enough of his speed regardless this preseason to prove that he's probably in it to win it in the long haul. BC Johnson, that is a gigantic takeaway. He will not play in 2022 after he didn't play in 2021. For a guy in a contract year, which BC is and was, that ain't good. You can rarely just take 2 years off in football and, come back. I mean, you can, but most of the world doesn't know who BC Johnson is. You do because you love the Vikings, but it'll be a long road back after 2 years off for a WR5, WR6 type to become relevant again. So best wishes to him. He was lost for the game, for the season, hopefully not his career. T.Y. McGill, we're going to talk about twice on this show. He banged up his ankle, and he did not get to author a third razzle-dazzle preseason game. In the end, evidently, it didn't matter one iota. And then Jalen Naylor, I think O'Connell said, might have had a concussion down the stretch. But the moral of the story is that a relatively healthy preseason outside of Irv Smith got a little muddied in preseason game number 3, and that's just what happens in this sport that you love, is dudes get hurt. Up until Saturday night, for the most part, Vikings were better than status quo, not having dude's injury, but it showed up. I guess not much more you can say about that. It was bound to happen, and especially sucks for BC. Number 3, Chris Reed, a sighting in a preseason game. So Reed has looked good in training camp, taking some backup center snaps at times. He's the odd man out for right guard because Ed Ingram has evidently won that job, which we have no qualms with, neither do you. But Reed, there was a time in March where he was, I thought, was going to be the right guard because his score sheet, especially per Pro Football Focus, was a lot better than Jesse Davis, who was signed like the week before him. However, in this game, Reed had an 80-something, I think it was 84, 86 PFF score, and that's awesome. And now you'll get to see what that translates to for his role on the 2022 Vikings offensive line. He probably won't start unless we've been fooled and hoodwinked on all this Ed Ingram stuff, but he will be a contingency plan to Garrett Bradbury if indeed Bradbury flounders out of the gate or however long it takes them to pull the hook. But Reed looked good against the Broncos, which bodes well for his long-term prognosis with the Vikings. We'll see what spot he carves out, if any, in 2022. Number 4, probably the reason you're watching the show, is Ryan Wright. Here's the deal. Now, I get it. I get the pendulum. You know, I try not to swing the pendulum on this show. Admittedly, I did so for Kellen Mond, looking pretty damn good against the Raiders, and then that was it. Like, you know, his career faded after one preseason game. I was excited about him winning the QB2 job because I didn't want to see Mannion, but it appears Mond is heading towards irrelevance, so I swung the pendulum there, self-admittedly. But on this Ryan Wright stuff, so Jordan Berry, who most folks liked because he wasn't shitty last year, he was a good punter, a good holder, did enough to be the punter in 2022. Well, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell and his special teams coaching staff disagreed. They evaluated both players throughout the spring and summer and decided we are going with this hoss of a punter who looks like a left guard, like 25 pounds shy of a left guard. We're going to have this guy be the punter. So the immediate aftermath, the reaction from Vikings fans was like, you idiots. The kicker has a comfort level with him. You can't cut the punter that has the comfort level with the kicker. We want the kicker to be good. I can guarantee you when they were deciding who to keep at punter, they factored in whether or not the guy could hold. They are not in the business of self-sabotage. So for us to spin our wheels and say, damn it, they're going to screw this good thing up that Joseph had going with Berry, they haven't quite realized it was ludicrous. They've already weighed that. And then, boom, wouldn't you know it, Ryan Wright comes out and looks like a total beast against the Broncos. He had 4 punts for 225 yards, 56.3 punts or yards per punt average. He even held a 58-yard field goal, which we're going to talk about in a second. I want you to, so it's fine that you overreact to roster decisions. I understand it. We did it with Spielman, Zimmer. Of course, it wasn't going to change with Adofo-Mensah and O'Connell. But usually, outside of like putting Kellen Mond or Cameron Dantzler in a doghouse, the leaders of the team aren't out to screw themselves. So when they told you they were releasing Jordan Berry, they had a really damn good reason for it. And you saw it, a 245-pound punter that kicked a 71-yard kick like it wasn't no thing. And then, you know, he held a kick successfully. So don't ever get it twisted that they forgot about a certain aspect of football. Like, you need to email them and tell them that, well, what about Berry as a holder? Nobody cares. Like, they're going to figure this out. And through one preseason game, it looks like they were right and the naysayers were wrong. Imagine that. The big takeaway is Ryan Wright. It was like one of the most exciting punting moments that I've ever seen as a Vikings fan, doing this since 1996. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Secondarily on special teams, and this is what number 5 on my list, is Greg Joseph. So I'm going to give this little speech about that field goal. From 58 yards out to start the fourth quarter, Greg Joseph in Denver's thin air gets a crack at a long-ass field goal, makes it with maybe a few yards to spare. And I'm thinking, like, that is the highlight of my preseason. I tweeted as such. If he can do that in a simulation of a regular season game, it gives me warm fuzzies inside that we have a kicker that can hit with the best of them. 58 yards is long for anybody, whether it's Harrison Butker, Justin Tucker, Daniel Carlson, Tyler Bass. The monsters of rock kickers, Joseph, at least per leg distance in a preseason game, is right there with them. Now, the way my brain is wired and watching the team for 26 years, there's certain shit that happens during games where I'm like, God, it feels like they never do this. Or it always seems like player X does player X. And that's how I arrived as a kid at my love for statistics, is I'd go to verify what I see on the television to see if it checks out. Am I right or am I wrong? Do I need to reevaluate my opinion? So this happened to me. I had an epiphany last night, and it's another thing that I tweeted. I was thinking like, God, that's got to be one of the longest, because I've never felt those like, holy shit butterflies when he made that field goal. I don't remember feeling that. Well, wouldn't you know it? If that kick, the 58-yarder from Joseph, was translated into a regular season or playoff game, that would have been the longest successful field goal in Vikings history. No arguments, no debates. Nobody else has kicked a further field goal than Greg Joseph in a meaningful Vikings game. Now, the search tools don't account for preseason. I can't remember if any of these dudes connected from 60-plus, probably. I can't give you that information, but to date, in the regular season, the longest field goals from Vikings lore are Blair Walsh in 2012 and Paul Ettinger in 2005. Those are from 56 yards. A Vikings kicker has never made a field goal of 57 yards or further out. Joseph, in a preseason game, hit from 58. If it mattered, it instantly would have been a Vikings team record. Most of the other big kicks are from 55, and those are almost all Blair Walsh. Ryan Longwell had one too. So with Blair Walsh, it gets lost in a lot of the revisionist history. He was really, really good before he was really, really bad. Don't ever forget. I don't know if it matters because your opinion of him will never rejuvenate, but Blair Walsh was absolutely terrific for 3 seasons, especially in his first season, when we were like, who's this guy? And he's just kicking all these 50-plus yarders. But the moral on Greg Joseph is that for one circumstance in the preseason, all of this delicious shit that's happened in Egan at training camp, him hitting 60-yarders with plenty of room to spare, it showed up in a semi-meaningful game in a preseason. So that's what you want to see. Now the rubber will hit the road against the Packers or the Eagles or the Bears. Or no, I think the Lions come first, the Saints. All of those first 4 games, you want to see Joseph get up to the plate and just stroke a 55-yarder, and we start to think this is automatic. It'll take a long time before we get there with that peace of mind, but he's showing seedlings of being able to do that, and that's why this coaching staff, this new regime, re-upped with him and said the hell with that Gabe Burchich guy or whatever the hell he called himself. 3 left to go. Chris Boyd, I think, secured a roster spot. Of course, I'll probably finish recording this show and something will happen to him, kind of like T.Y. Miguel, who I'll talk about in just a second. But Chris Boyd, there was a drive against the Broncos. I can't remember what quarter it was, but he single-handedly defended the drive. It was pass breakup after pass breakup, and the Broncos had to punt. So Boyd, what has he been with the team since 2018? He kind of could have been perceived as on the roster bubble or roster cut, but now because of his veteran resume and the fact that Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth haven't completely broken out to steal jobs in the preseason, I think Boyd will make the team as a CB5 or CB6, and it was only solidified against the Broncos because his PFF score was also in the 80s. So congratulations to the flamboyant Chris Boyd. I think he'll make the cut tomorrow. What's the second to last one? Oh, yes, Nick Mullens won the QB2 job without having to do a damn thing. They trotted out Mond and Mannion. That's probably the whole, at the top of the show, I gave the speech about the preseason being no good. It was probably because the quarterbacks were Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion outside of that Raider game when Mond looked pretty good. Mullens is the QB2. He didn't even have to play against the Broncos. I think that's because they're like, yeah, no, you don't even need to do that. We're fine. Let's see these other 2 guys just flame out all on their own, and then you, homie, can have the job. I'll reiterate one more time that Mullens is not only a better QB2 than Mond or Mannion, he's one of the best QB2s in the NFL. So the Vikings have that in their holster. That's delicious. They haven't had a good QB2 since Case Keenum, arguably Trevor Siemian, if you think Trevor Siemian is good, and that's 4 or 5 years, depending on your interpretation. But Mullens didn't have to do anything, not even lift a finger. QB2, which is what was kind of expected. And then finally, before I got on the YouTube program with you today, T.Y. McGill was released. He was your defensive preseason hero, especially in the first 2 games. He looked like a 29-year-old lineman that suddenly figured it out. But up and cut. Ain't gonna work here anymore. And it's moments like these, especially now that I do this as a career, all this Viking stuff, I try to figure out, why does the preseason even matter if dudes like Albert Wilson catch 2 touchdowns and then McGill has a sack and a half and these tackles for loss, looks like a showman, and then he's the first guy cut before final roster cuts. I don't get it. I need to grow and learn. The preseason must be this audition for technique, not necessarily big plays, which sounds like the weirdest thing in the world when it rolls off my tongue. But T.Y. McGill, who was the NT3 on the depth chart behind Harrison Phillips, who's apparently a nose tackle, and T.J. Smith, it was McGill. And we thought he had done enough to earn a roster spot, and we were wrong. So always take the preseason stats or even big highlights with a grain of salt, because evidently they're not a rubber stamp to, making the regular season roster. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. I'm not sure what time the Vikings will drop the 53-man depth chart, but I can guarantee you that this week shows will be dominated by that topic, especially with Josh Fry on Wednesday. All we got, thank God the preseason's over, and skol, baby.